Shamaya, you did it.
STL Music.
Is that good? Welcome back to the show. Yo, listen up, we back in the game. Sweep the league, we got the flame. Motivated to the fullest every single day. We wake up, get it in every way. Right to the 222 and the global inspiration. So this sports and top news, no hesitation. Sweep the league is back. We always coming back, that's a fact. Wanna tell them that. STL Music, mama, we did it. Where we at? Coach Jill in the house with the flow so tight. Never Rebroadcast, we united. The best show, Monday through Friday. If this ain't different, they lying. We got the energy. When I say sweep, you say the league. Sweep the league, sweep the league, sweep the league, sweep the league. San Antonio, let's go. Sweep the league. Sweep the league. Sweep the league. San Antonio, let's go.
Hey, it's Rain Fernandez, and you're watching Sweep the League. Be sure to follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, and Facebook at Rain Fernandez, Rayne Fernandez.
We build a legacy, yeah, they know the name. STL Music, it's a movement, not just a claim. Loyalty, respect, that's the code we honor. In the face of adversity, we stand stronger. We build a legacy, yeah, they know the name. STL Music, it's a movement, not just a claim. Loyalty, respect, that's the code we honor. In the face of adversity, we stand stronger.
Hey, this is George Iceman Gervin, and you're listening to Sweet the League Radio.
All right, welcome to a Wednesday edition of Sweep the League. Rudy Campos Jr. Going to be joined by Hall of Famer Derek Gervin. Special guest tonight about 9:30. We're going to have former NBA General Manager Pete Babcock. He was a general manager for the San Diego Clippers, the Denver Nuggets, the Atlanta Hawks, most notably. We're going to do a little bit of tribute, a little bit of memory lane with the recent passing of Dikembe Mutombo. Mr. Babcock was a good friend of Dikembe, and again, the NBA is mourning the loss of Dikembe Mutombo, so we will talk to Mr. Babcock about that tonight about 9:30. So be sure to tune in for Sweep the League. At that second half of the show, we also talk a little bit about some GM moves if we have some time permitting. But most importantly, we're going to remember Dikembe Mutombo as we launch our 2024-2025 NBA preview tonight. We're going to do some NBA talk tomorrow. We'll get into some NCAA talk, some NFL talk, and then, of course, Friday's our Friday pick'ems. So we'll go over every single game, NCAA and NFL, as we get ready for the football weekend. Let's bring in Derek Gervin, Hall of Famer Derek Gervin. Derek, how you doing tonight, man?
I'm doing fine, Rudy. How about you?
Oh, good. Very excited to talk some basketball. It feels weird. It feels like we just got done talking basketball not too long ago, but it feels kind of different talking basketball tonight.
Well, so we got a special guest, so that's a good thing. We've lost a lot of players and good people as well in the last week or so. So to have Mr. Babcock come on here tonight, someone that's very familiar with Dikembe Mutombo, I think that's going to be a great show.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you've played with the NBA. You've been able to be around some of the greats of the game. You know, me just kind of living through your eyes and other people's eyes. I'm interested to see, the real side of Dikembe. And I know with Pete Babcock, it's going to be a really good segment with him talking about Dikembe because, I mean, you're talking about not just one of the best players, defensive players in the league, just one of the great guys of the NBA in general. I mean, basketball without borders, as you mentioned. And it's kind of ironic, Derek, because we're talking to Mr. Babcock in a little bit. He actually had a couple of programs that he started. Life Experience program when he was with the Atlanta Hawks, when he was with the Denver Nuggets. I believe him and Alex English had that Fast Break for Life tour. So you're talking about one humanitarian to another when it comes to Pete Babcock to Dikembe Mutombo. So some great players and some great people in the NBA ranks there.
Well, Mr. Babcock is also a humanitarian, and then he spent 42 years overall in the NBA, and he's dealt with several teams in different capacities. He's even been a vice president at one time. So he's done a lot. He's seen a lot of the ins and outs, and he knows a lot of these guys personally. He's a really good man. And sometimes you have people that are in certain positions, they don't really have relationships with the players off the court. They see him at maybe, and you might come over to a meeting or some meet with the commissioner, discuss ideas or the players association or whatever. But Mr. Babcock goes over and beyond. He established relationships with a lot of these players, and that's why I'm really happy to have him on the show tonight.
Yeah, it's going to be a great segment with Mr. Pete Babcock. He's going to be joining us about 9:30. We'll probably go to commercial right before he joins us. That way we can give the rest of the show to Mr. Pete Babcock here. It's Hall of Famer Derek Irvin, Rudy Campos Jr. Derek, we're looking at the NBA. I mean, season starts a couple of days. I mean, we're from preseason. We're already here. You see training camps going on. Media day was a few days ago for the San Antonio Spurs. Of course, every team goes into the season with the highest expectations. Kind of funny how one guy, the so-called GOAT of the NBA in most people's eyes today, said that he doesn't have any expectations technically going into the year with the Los Angeles Lakers. Is that the best way to go into a season starting 0-0?
Well, it would be if he didn't mean it, but LeBron doesn't mean that. The object of the game is to put the best team you can on the floor and to try to win games. And when you're in the city of LA that has 17 NBA championships, there's one expectation every year, and that expectation is to win the championship. So, of course, he's going to say that because now he has some young guys, including his son on the team, Bronny Jr., and he has Dalton Connect. So they've added a couple of rookies. And I guess he's got to say that to kind of take the pressure off of those guys. But we know behind the scenes what he really means. He wants to win. He wants to win, and he wants to win now because he's not getting any younger. And this is year 22.
When you're going into a season and you kind of hear, well, I don't really have expectations going in. First, when I look at it, if I'm a teammate, I'm like, so you're not expecting us to do anything? That doesn't really put any confidence coming into the season. But then I thought, well, you have a very, very unexperienced coach in JJ Redick starting as well. So maybe it is a good idea to have the expectations just a tad bit lower. Not saying there's no playoffs, but I mean, to put the expectations a little bit lower might ease the fans a little bit, I guess.
Yeah, but when you put D'Angelo Russell, who they brought back, you still retain Austin Reeves.
Yeah.
You got LeBron James, you got Anthony Davis, and now they've named Rui Hachimura the fifth starter, which I thought he should have been all along. That's a team that's trying to win, and they know they have to try to keep up with the Joneses, as they say, because a lot of these teams have upgraded their roster. And if you look at it the other day, to me, the Minnesota Timberwolves upgraded their roster process of elimination. They lost a really good player, Karl Anthony Towns, the all-star player, but they gained DiVincenzo, Dante DiVincenzo, who brings toughness, and he's hit big shots. Had a really good year with the Knicks last year, averaged about 15 points. And then you have the other guy they brought in. And so Julius Randle. Who's a guy that's trying to show everyone what they forgot about his game. We know he was out a lot last year with his injury. So he's a guy that wants to come back and make a strong statement. So you put him and DiVincenzo together, I think that makes Minnesota even more formidable team potentially on paper than it was last year.
Yeah, a lot of Knicks fans I started to see kind of upset about that trade. I mean, not that they're upset they got Karl Anthony Towns, but they really felt like Julius Randle, a healthy Julius Randle, would be a lot better fit than Karl Anthony Towns with the current construction. Before we get into other playoff teams, or teams in general, because we're going to look at real quick at the West and the Eastern Conference. You had the local team, the good guys of the NBA, the San Antonio Spurs recently had media day. Of course, they got CP3. They've got Harrison Barnes. They've got a cast of thousands coming back. You see the new look in Jeremy Sohan. You see, Devin Vassell is going to start the year off on the injury list. Basically, he's not going to be reevaluated till November 1st, so he may not be ready come the opening night. He might be missing a couple of games, so you kind of already got that going. You've got Stephon Castle coming in. Expectations from fans, and I've even seen some media guys talking about this team is a playoff team.
Playoffs? Don't talk
And
about playoffs? You kidding
really,
me? Playoffs?
I'm with Jim Moore. Playoffs, I don't know if I can expect that. I see a turnaround, but I don't expect a playoff team from San Antonio.
Let's just say it's going to be tough. Oklahoma City, Dallas, Minnesota, Denver, New Orleans, Phoenix, possibly resurgent Memphis, Golden State. I mean, we can go on and on, man. It's going to be interesting to see what Memphis looks like this year with Ja being back.
Yeah.
So you got a lot of tough teams in the Western Conference that are trying to stay afloat. And they know to do that, you have to really put a good product together. And you see a lot of teams continuing to get better. And so it's going to be interesting, the Western Conference, because the Lakers, and you look at so many teams, I don't know if the Spurs can, if I can put them in there. I'm glad Victor's going into year 2. They brought in Chris Paul, but we know Chris is about 37 now, maybe even 38.
Yeah.
And he's had injury problems. So even if you look at their roster, they didn't upgrade a whole lot at different positions other than Chris Paul. And so we'll see what they look like. Harrison Barnes, but we don't know yet how that's going to pan out. I know he does play hard. He's hit some big buckets. He's played with the Warriors, so he knows what it's like to win. He played well in Sacramento, but I don't know if those guys are enough to get us over the hump, and especially with Devin Vassell not being there at the beginning of the year. So it's going to be hard. We might end up treading water a little bit, and then we see what happens, man. But I'm not expecting playoffs. I'll be happy for play-in.
Well, I don't even know if the play-in is possible. I mean, if we're looking at the list in the Western Conference, I mean, we can pretty much pencil in Oklahoma City, Denver, Dallas, Phoenix, probably Minnesota is another one. Sacramento upgraded. They got DeMar DeRozan, so that helps them out. That's another one you can probably pencil in. The Pelicans, I think they've got it on the right path, so I'm going to put the Pelicans. Haven't even mentioned the Clippers. We don't know what's going on with Kawhi and Paul George. That actually may be a team that I can see kind of fall, because remember, Memphis didn't make it last year. A resurging Memphis team, a healthy Memphis team, that probably gets them into the top, maybe 8-10 teams roughly. So Golden State's another one, even though they don't have Klay Thompson. Houston Rockets. I mean, you're talking the Spurs need to win an additional 24 games just to make the play-in spot. That's a lot.
Hey, even the Wizards got better. They brought in Valanciunas. Yeah. So that shores up their center spot. So that even makes them better. It's going to be interesting, man. You talking I'm trying to think who's going to be the worst teams in the West if you really look at it, because like you said, you brought up Houston, Portland. Yeah, those would probably be Portland and the Spurs if you're really looking at it the way I am. And like I say, I think the Wizards are going to be better. I think Golden State's going to be better now with Buddy Hield. And you're going to see some changes. A lot of these teams are going to look different, but a lot of them are doing things that they think that's going to make them better. And the Spurs have been kind of quiet other than Chris Paul and Harrison Barnes. So I don't know if they can keep up. I'm hoping they can, because I'm here in San Antonio, but our job is to be honest. And it's going to be rough in the Western Conference. Hey, good thing. Victor supposedly put on 25 pounds, so hopefully that's a good thing. I think now he's about 235 supposedly, so maybe that'll help. But their roster is still not enough to contend with these teams in the Western Conference.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking, man. I don't know. I mean, I think they're better than Portland. I don't have any doubt about that. Are they better than Utah? That's my question. I don't know if they're better than Utah. They might be. So, I mean, I can see 30 wins, 31 wins. I see an improvement. I don't see 46 wins. It's going to take 46 wins to get into the play-in spot, as it did last year. Took 46 wins. I mean, 44 maybe at the minimum, but 46 was last year. I can't see a 24 game turnaround. So I think they do
Oh,
improve some, but not much. There's no way. There's not that.
and you know the sad thing is teams can take time off now. You got to get off right out the gates
Yeah.
because of the record. And yeah, you want to make sure you have a good placement come playoff time. So even to get into the top 8 is tough. And then you don't have those off nights. Every night you got to bring it. And teams in the past would, they just wanted to get to the playoffs and then see what happens then, be healthy. But now you have to fight to get to the playoffs. It's so stacked in both conferences.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is going to hurt them the most. So them in the Utah and the Spurs, I expect to be 2 of the bottom feeders this year. It's going to be hard to keep up, man. So these rosters have upgraded themselves.
Very much so. And, one roster I want to talk to you about, because last year we said, they've got the team. They just didn't have the one missing piece. I think everybody outside now, considering Minnesota got the Randall deal and traded Cat away, which frees up the money to pretty much secure Anthony Edwards. So he can pretty much get paid by Minnesota now. So that was kind of the reason why they ended up making that move. But you're talking about Phoenix, man. They had one missing spot, and that was point guard. They went out and got Jones. So to me, with Nurkic there as well, that kind of puts them top 4 minimum, I think, for me right there.
I don't have them top 4 because Nurkic kind of was disappointing when he got
Mm.
there. But now he should be a little more familiar with the team. Or Bradley Beal should be a little more familiar. So
Yeah.
they lost Eric Gordon, but I mean, they look like a decent team. You got KD and Devin Booker. I expect Devin Booker to take another leap forward. If that sounds crazy, it might sound crazy to some people, but what I say
No.
by that mean by that is him and KD have a tendency to take turns, right? And we know KD is not really a guy that's going to be a vocal leader, and sometimes he's not. He takes the back seat. Devin Booker needs to establish himself this year as the man of that team. They need a leader, and Trey Jones is not that guy. So they need one of their superstars. And if Devin Booker can do that, and KD doesn't need the ball as much. My only question is how is this all going to affect Bradley Beal? Because he's the guy we know that needs the ball in his hands a lot. But if Booker takes over this team, that's when I expect them to go a long way. If they play like last year, I expect the same results.
Yeah, it's we'll see the same. Well, hopefully we'll see what's going on here in a little bit. We're gonna have Mr. Pete Babcock gonna be joining us here in just a little bit. He will be on the show here just in a little while. We'll talk to him about obviously Dikembe Mutombo, who passed away recently. We're also gonna maybe talk to him a little bit about some GMing here. So let's go ahead and get him on here. We've got Mr. Pete Babcock, former NBA GM, most notably for the Denver Nuggets as well as the Atlanta Hawks. Mr. Babcock's going to be joining us right now. Let's bring him on to Sweep the League. Mr. Babcock, how are you doing tonight, sir? Thank you for joining us here on Sweep the League.
I'm doing fine. How are you guys doing?
Doing fantastic, sir. Fantastic.
Mr.
Derek,
Pete,
how are you?
Mr. Pete Babcock, I'm fine, and I got to thank you sincerely for coming on the show. We had already talked about it being a tribute kind of to Mutombo, but before we even started talking about Mutombo, it was Dikembe, rest in peace. I wanted to let Rudy kind of know a little bit about you because I'm older than Rudy by about 16 years, I
Like
believe.
that much.
So I kind of want people to know, Mr. Babcock, and you've also won humanitarian awards, and you've been around this game for 42 years. So can you kind of let the people know? I know all the wonderful things you've done. Can you kind of familiarize the people with yourself, please?
Well, that's nice of you to say. I'm not sure what I want to say about myself. I was fortunate for 42 years to kind of live my dream of the NBA. I was never good enough to be a player, so I found another way to do it. And, I did it. I was a volunteer scout for the New Orleans Jazz. Elgin Baylor was the head coach. Bill Burka was the GM. And they taught me an awful lot. And I learned under them and made my mistakes and got better. Worked as a volunteer for the 2 years. And then went to work for the Lakers for 2 years for Jack McCloskey. He was an assistant coach to Jerry West. And Jack hired me to be a part-time scout. And then 2 years after that, Don Nelson and John Killalay in Milwaukee hired me to be a Western regional scout. And then 2 years after that, Paul Silas gave me an opportunity to be on the bench with him with the old San Diego Clippers. And within 4 years, I was the GM of that team, not because of anything special I did, but we had a pretty unstable franchise. So in my fourth year, I was literally the senior member of the franchise. That included secretaries, that included everybody, because the turnover was unbelievable. A guy named Donald Sterling had purchased the team in my second year there. And everybody knows the story about Sterling and his instability and his issues. And so I moved up quickly, probably faster than I should have. And then when he moved the team to LA, I decided I could not be part of the instability anymore, and I needed to get out of there. So I resigned and signed with the Denver Nuggets, and worked my way up to be president and GM and minority owner of the team in the last 2 years that I was there. And we had a great 6-year run. Doug Moe was our head coach. We competed against teams like the San Antonio Spurs and some guy named George Gervin, who would light us up night after night. But he and Alex English would have great battles back and forth. And fierce, friendly competition is the best way I could describe it. Because both guys respected one another. And then we sold the team in 1990, and I signed with the Atlanta Hawks and spent 13 years there as the GM. And we made a conscious decision in 1990 when I joined the Hawks. There's two ways to rebuild your team. You can trade away all your stars and accumulate draft picks and hope that you get better because of that. But it's a painful process to go through because who knows how long it takes to get those draft picks that are necessary for you to make that big jump. So I thought, I don't want to go through all that losing. So I thought, well, let's do this instead. Let's stay respectable. Let's try to make the playoffs every year, which we did. And our draft pick will be a complementary player, a role player. But let's build our team with trades and free agency. So we, remember the order here, we traded for Mookie Blaylock. We made a trade we traded Doc Rivers, who was at the end of his career, for the Clippers pick of Stacey Augmon. And that became our starting backcourt. And then we signed Craig Elo as a free agent. We signed Andrew Lang as a free agent. Hired Lenny Wilkins as our coach. Traded for Steve Smith and Grant Long. Traded for Christian Laettner and signed Dikembe as a free agent, and the team took off. Unfortunately, we were playing in an era where there was this guy in Chicago. It was really hard to get through. And in 1993-94, we had the best record in the East. And I would tell you the reason we had the best record in the East, and we were a good team, is because this guy in Chicago decided to play baseball for the year. And so when he left to go play baseball for the year, gave us a chance to be the number one team in the East. When he came back, I would tease him and say, you could have stayed in baseball like 3 or 4 more years. It would have been fine with us. But like everybody else, we had trouble getting through the Chicago Bulls and Michael. But we had a good run. And then in 1999 season, it was the it was a season where we had a lockout, so we had a 50-game schedule, and we finished 2 games off the best record in the East. And unfortunately, we met the Knicks when they were hitting on all cylinders. They had Camby and Sprewell and Houston, and they were just playing great basketball. And we were shorthanded. Steve Smith, Smitty played, but his knee was kind of banged up. LaFonso Ellis was out with an injury. Alan Henderson was out with an injury. So we were pretty shorthanded. So we lose to the Knicks, and our ownership decided we're going to tear this thing apart and start over and get rid of all the long-term contracts. And that was kind of the beginning of the end. And so we were forced to make trades, like trading. Steve Smith had the longest contract at the time, and so we were told, get rid of the long-term contracts, bring back 1-year deals instead. And we had no interest whatsoever in trading Smitty because he's like an all-time great person, represents your franchise in the best way possible, and your city, and a good player. I mean, everything. Yeah, Steve had everything, and he's one of those players you want him to retire with your team. But they didn't care what the name was. It was the contract. Get rid of the long-term contract, bring back a one-year deal. The only deal in the whole NBA that worked was for the infamous J.R. Rider. And so J.R., as talented as he was, had issues that as basketball people, we weren't capable of dealing with. And I try to tell our staff that. I says, we're bringing in, we're basketball guys. We're not psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers. We're basketball guys. So it's going to be hard to deal with JR's litany of issues that he has. And sure enough, it didn't work out very well. And then we were told that people I worked for said we will not resign Dikembe Mutombo. And I fought like that, crazy about that, because I said, why? I mean, it's like what Dikembe does, as you know, Derek, players, as they get older, a lot of times they lose their speed, their quickness, their jumping ability. But Dikembe's game was based on timing, and he was always going to be 7'2". He was always going to have that length. That wasn't going away. And so I argued that his game was timing. It wasn't speed and quickness. And he's going to be able to block shots and rebound for a number of years more. This is premature. They wouldn't pay him. They said flat out not going to pay him no matter what it is, either trade him or lose him in free agency. So we were forced to trade him. And that was kind of the beginning. That everything kind of just went downhill at that point for the team. And then I got fired in 2003, went to work with my brother in Toronto for 2 years, and then thought I'd retired. And then Cleveland called and asked me to help them prepare for the draft and scout players. And I didn't have to live in Cleveland to do it. And so I ended up doing it for 10 years with them, and then retired after the championship in 2016.
Mr. Babcock, I don't want to interrupt, and I'm sorry, but I want to go back just a second to what you said. I have a question for you, and I know a lot of people have wanted to ask some general managers, and I've been a little unfortunate tonight. When you dealt with Dikembe, okay, so you're with him 5 years, you're in Denver together. And then Atlanta. When you go to Atlanta together, okay.
Yeah. We excuse me, we signed him from Denver. So I had left Denver.
Okay. My question is it ever get to a point, as you being a general manager or a vice president or whoever it may be, does it ever get to a point where you might not want to give up a player, not so much just because of their game, but also because of you developed a relationship, and it could be where it could get personal sometime, and you develop a friendship with a player and you might want to hold on to that player? Does that ever happen?
It happened all the time, because I used to talk to Wayne Embry. Wayne Embry is one of my closest friends and mentors still today. And we used to talk about this, and I would tell Wayne, we have a Christmas party at my house every year. We have the players there. We interact with the players. We do things socially together. We do what I called our life experiences program, where on the road, I would take players to visit Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C., or the Pentagon, visit with the Secretary of Defense, meet with John Lewis when we were in Washington, D.C. I would try to do things like that so it would bond us together as a team and also be a learning experience for all of us. And Wayne thought all things were great, but he said he was always cautious about not having the players over to his house and developing that close personal relationship because it made it too hard, to make a trade. And so I said, well, I understand that, but I'd rather have that closeness and still make the decision to make a trade, but it'd be really difficult. I'll give you a couple examples. One was we traded Andrew Lang and Spud Webb to Minnesota for Leitner. I was really close with Andrew. We spent a lot of time together. I did some work with Al Gore when he was vice president, dealing with youth violence in the country and trying to come up, programs. He wanted to hear about programs we were initiating to work on that issue. And so I called Andrew and I said, would you like to go with me to meet the vice president? And he goes, of the United States? And I said, yeah, the vice president of the United States. And so, Drew went with me, and Grant Long actually went with me too. But we were really close. And so I had to call Drew in, and tell him, hey, Drew, I'm sorry, but we've got to trade you to Minnesota because it was the best thing for our team. It was the right basketball decision to make. Later ends up making the All-Star team with us and plays the best basketball of his career, in my opinion. And Drew is a great, solid, reliable player, but he wasn't an all-star. And so business-wise, I had to do it. But it was hard. I mean, it was really hard, because I knew his family, I knew him. And then, when we got Dikembe, another example, we got Dikembe, David Falk represented him, and David had a number in mind that he wanted to get, and we were competing with other teams to sign him as a free agent. And we couldn't quite get to the number, not because we weren't willing to spend the money. We didn't have the cap room. So David calls me and says, I came up with a plan on how you can develop enough cap room. Detroit will give you 2 firsts and 2 seconds for Grant Long and Stacey Augmon. And I said, well, that's nice, but we have no interest in trading Grant Long and Stacey Augmon. I mean, they're a big part of our team. And I was close with these guys. And David said, well, I understand that, but your choice is you want Dikembe or do you want to keep Grant Long and Stacey Augmon, but you can't do both. And so I had to make a business decision. We had to go get Dikembe, but it killed me because I don't want to give up either one of those guys. Now we turned around later and re-signed Grant when he became a free agent and brought him back. But the personal part gets involved. If you let yourself become close to the players. And I just felt if you don't become close to the players, like what's the point of every day? It's like if you don't develop those relationships, it's not as much fun to me. It's more fun to be involved with people. So they're not easy.
Thank you for your honesty.
Yeah, we're talking to Mr. Pete Babcock, former NBA GM for Atlanta, for Denver, had a few stops in other NBA teams. Appreciate him joining on tonight. Pete, my thing with me is that I do other shows with other people, especially San Antonio Spurs media guys, and they always ask me, like, if you were a GM of a team, would you take phone calls on everybody? And I said, yeah, I would. I mean, that's the GM's job. They said, what about Tim Duncan or Victor Wembanyama? I said, I would take a phone call on everybody. A GM's job is to take a phone call. Doesn't mean I'm trading the guy, but I have to do my job because that's my job. I've got to take phone calls, and that's what people don't understand. Right. But on the GM spot, we've got a lot of fans that interact with us. And, when we made mention of you coming on, the most popular question that everybody wanted to know, we like to give the fans a little bit of some love here. So they always wanted to know this as a GM, how difficult is it to rebuild a team? Because as Spurs fans are watching this show and people across the NBA, they're going through rebuilds, and we all know it's difficult, but from a GM's perspective, how difficult is it to rebuild a team?
It's hard. That's why I was mentioning it before. Like when I went to Atlanta, the decision I had to make was, do we get bad in order to get good? You know, do we trade away a bunch of a bunch of players and accumulate a bunch of first round picks and hope we hit one of them with a Tim Duncan or Michael Jordan or LeBron James or whoever it may be. And I hated to go that route, number one, because you go through the pain of losing and you don't know how long it's going to take before it manifests itself into something good. And the other part is you have to get lucky twice. And what I mean by that is, so let's say that you have the worst record in the NBA. And you go, okay, we're in a great spot to get a great player this year. Well, first of all, you have to suffer through a terrible season to get that position, right? Oftentimes, the worst team, the worst record, doesn't win the lottery.
Yeah.
So there's no guarantee. So you have to get lucky and win the lottery. So that's one. And then number two, you have to win the lottery in a year where there's a franchise player. And the best example I can give you of that is that with when I was in Cleveland, we won the lottery a couple of times. And the second time that we won the lottery, there was not a franchise player in the draft.
Yeah.
That we were studying like 7 to 9 players for the first pick. You shouldn't be studying 7 or 9 players for the first pick unless it's like unheard of, fantastic draft, which it wasn't. There was no franchise player, and our management team couldn't trade the pick away. I mean, nobody wanted the pick. Nobody wanted the pick, and we took Anthony Bennett, and it didn't work out.
Yeah.
And it's not Anthony's fault. I mean, we just made the decision. He was the most NBA ready athlete, and it didn't work out. So you got to get lucky twice. Like the Spurs are a really great example. They get David Robinson, and then they get Tim Duncan, and their franchise. And then they did a fantastic job of building around that. And probably done a better job than anybody in the league with international players and bringing them in with later picks. But without the nucleus, without Robinson and Duncan to begin with, how far would it have gone? I don't know. So my position when I got to Atlanta was, I don't want to go through that. Let's stay respectable. So during those years we were trying to rebuild, we were winning 41, 42, 43 games. So we were staying respectable. We weren't, and we'd make the playoffs, but we'd get knocked out early. And we did it through trades and free agency. The downside to doing the trade and free agency route is you never get a Michael Jordan. You never get a Tim Duncan because people aren't going to trade you those players. So unless you had some means of signing one of those guys as a free agents, you're not going to get them. So it's hard. I think the two hardest things I found were rebuilding the team and hiring the right coach.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of good coaches out there, but it's hiring the right coach for the right situation. Like when we hired Lenny in Atlanta, he was perfect for our team because we had professional guys. It's Steve Smith and Grant Long and Tyrone Corbin and Dikembe, and we had all these guys that show up to work every day. And so Lenny's not a yeller and screamer, and he expects you to show up and do your job. And we had players that would do that. So he was a perfect fit. And so we spent 7 years together. It was wonderful.
Yeah, with Lenny Wilkins, hiring Lenny at that time, you mentioned he's the type of coach that comes in, just expects you to get the job done. And the team that you put together in Atlanta with Mookie Blaylock, Steve Smith, Dikembe, he had one player that kind of was with him before in Craig Elo in Cleveland, but that team kind of similarly resembles that Cleveland team with Larry Nance and Doherty and Mark Price, just guys that came in, did their job, expected stuff. They expected, Lenny to be a certain way. He expected his players to be a certain way. So that Hawk and Cleveland team, both of them, to me, they're very, very similar. And I think that's why both teams were successful. under Lenny Wilkens here.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point. And Lenny was terrific to work with, a gentleman, great person, and knowledgeable basketball person, obviously. So and accomplished basketball person. So he checked all the boxes, and I really loved working together with him for all those years.
Yeah,
Mr.
Derek.
Babcock, did you work? Yeah, I want to know. Did you also work with George Karl
I never worked with
at
George.
any time?
No. I mean, I knew George.
Well,
I knew George, but we never worked together.
It seemed like you wanted players. You had high-class players, and I spent a little time with Steve in February of this past year. But you, as a general manager today, and if you had, say, George Karl, you have some coaches that do the yelling, and it's kind of like old school. Today, would you still, with these young guys that we're dealing with, would you have kind of be a little different? Do you have to be careful how you deal with some of these young guys for the fact that a lot of them are very sensitive, and then you throw in the salaries that they make in today? How would you deal with the younger guys today if you were general manager or vice president?
Yeah, I think you really have to adapt to the times and adjust accordingly in terms of how you handle your team, and that's what Lenny was such a terrific coach. That's one of the things he was so good at, is he knew how to deal with individuals, and he dealt with them as individuals. So what worked for one player maybe didn't work for another player. But to add to that, our philosophy was always, as a piece of the puzzle when we were making decisions on adding a player to our team, he needed to fit the profile. He needed to. We wanted the Dikembe Mutombos, the LaFonso Ellis's, the Andrew Langs, the Steve Smiths. We wanted these, Grant Long, Ty Corbin. These guys are all mature, classy guys who represent themselves well, they represent their families well. They just got a sense of professionalism. They knew how to conduct themselves. So character was always huge with us. We did, and another team. We're not the only team that did this. Most teams do it, but everybody has different philosophy about it. I got called a Boy Scout a lot of times about like you want guys that are too squeaky clean, and others would argue with me and say, no, you can't have everybody who's squeaky clean. You got to have that guy that maybe is the rebel to a degree, and maybe has issues, but he's a great player. The only time we went that directions with JR, and I like JR as a person, JR Ryder, but he had issues to deal with in life that we weren't capable of dealing with, in terms of counseling him and all that, and it was beyond us. It was beyond other people too. That's why he had the issues he had while he was playing in the league. But aside from that, we tried to be sure. That's probably the only time I can think of where I kind of went against my principles, and didn't go with just character wasn't at the top.
Yeah, totally understand.
I was really going to say this quick. Go ahead, Rudy. I want to say this. Let me say this quick. So we talk to a lot of kids, and I still deal with a lot of kids, and I try to get them to understand that I know they have these name, image, and likeness, and all of that going on now, but I still believe that behavior matters a lot, character. And if you come down to two players that's similar in skill set, aren't you believe you're going to take the guy that's most trustworthy? And don't you think that that's what we need to get back to a little more today? I know a lot of times the coaches today have to swallow their tongues. And if you remember Rick Carlisle, I'll bring up Rick since he was my assistant coach with the Nets. Rick had to it was going to either be where he changes a little bit and deals with Luka a different way, or it's going to be combustion. Don't you think that it's still the locker room presence that we don't hear about? Isn't that like really the most important thing even before you step onto the court?
I think you got to have a good locker room. One of the reasons that we did the programs that we did off the court was to help bring our guys together. Paul Silas told me one time when I first went to work for Paul, we'd be out we'd run together all the time, and we're out jogging, and I was always talking to him about his experiences as a player, and he said, the most successful teams he said he was ever part of were the teams with the greatest diversity, and he said that what that meant was we'd have players from the north, the south, from rural areas, from cities. We had players with different religious backgrounds. We had players that we were different, but everybody respected those differences. And so I always embraced that, is that we would talk to our players all the time about, respecting our differences rather than discriminating due to those differences. And then we would set up all these activities, which I call Life Experiences Program, to bring our guys together. And I would talk to GMs about it, and we did these things. They were mandatory. It wasn't like a voluntary deal. And I talked to other GMs about it. Some GMs would say, "Nah, our players would never go for that. They wouldn't buy into it." And I said, like here, it's like Ford's Theater, for example. So we fly into Washington, D.C. The afternoon before a game, and I had set up Ford's Theater ahead of time. We took the bus from the plane right to Ford's Theater before we went to the hotel, and we're getting off the bus going in, and Sharif Abdul-Rahim says to me, I understand the purpose of a lot of these trips. I'm not sure I quite understand the relevance of this one. So I said, Reef, listen, humor me. We're going to be here for an hour, and you're going to listen to this park ranger who's an expert on the Lincoln assassination, and he's going to tell you the story about how Booth conspired with these other guys and how it all happened and how they put the conspiracy together. They tried to, the plan was to kill the vice president and kill the secretary of state and all this, wipe out the government. And he goes, all right, I'll listen. So we're supposed to be there for an hour. Well, Reef asked so many questions. We were there for like almost 2 hours because once he got into it, so we're going out to the bus afterwards. I said, so I'm going to guess that you think this was worthwhile? And he goes, man, I knew Lincoln got assassinated. I didn't know the whole story. This is unbelievable. This is incredible. So my point is, and I would tell other GMs this, even though sometimes you would take players kicking and screaming into something that they didn't want to do, we never had one that after the fact they weren't raving about it, saying like this was incredible. I mean, we did one that was probably the most ambitious one in terms of time. Was we were playing the Denver Nuggets, and it was the last game of like a 7-game road trip, and we had been invited. This was after 9/11 had happened. We'd been invited by NORAD to go to Colorado Springs and go into Cheyenne Mountain, underneath the mountain, and see the whole operation. And so I talked to our coaches, and they said, we're probably not going to practice the day before the game because it's the end of a road trip, and we'll probably give the guys that day off. So I said, okay, that's perfect. So we bused from Denver to Colorado Springs, which is an hour bus ride. We went they took us inside the mountain, took us through everything, showed us how, and this big room where they track everything that's in the air in North America. They showed us how they were able to get everything down on the ground from all the communications, and then just told us all about the history of building the city under the mountain that, in theory, would sustain a direct hit if the mountain itself got attacked. It was an hour bus ride back, and our players were still talking about it the next year in training camp about how incredible it was. But I would tell GMs who were hesitant about it is like, it's a great bonding experience for your players. It's a great learning experience for everybody. And if you have to make it mandatory. If you don't make it mandatory, you get like 2 or 3 guys show up, and that there's no point. There's no bonding then because it's not a team activity. So I didn't kill the guys with it. We didn't do it every road trip, but we'd do like maybe 2 a month. And we did a lot of them over the years, and never had one that didn't bring the guys together and they weren't excited about it.
Yeah, tonight we're joined by Mr. Pete Babcock, former NBA GM for Denver and Atlanta, also with San Diego Clippers, a 42-year career in the NBA. Appreciate him joining us tonight. We are talking to him about his NBA's experiences as a GM, but most importantly, as we're coming to the ends of the show, we got a good amount of time left on the back part of the show. We do want to get into the memory of Dikembe Mutombo, who did pass away recently, and before getting into talk about Dikembe, you mentioned about life experience program that you started when you were with the Atlanta Hawks. Basically, the robust life off the court for NBA players. You mentioned Ford's Theater, NORAD, going to Ground Zero, the Pentagon. Guys were able to hear different speakers. I believe John Wooden was one. Andrew Young was another one. A few other people like that. So you also had a program before that. And it's kind of transitional because we're talking about this and it transitions to the type of person Dikembe was. But when you were in Denver, you initiated the Fast Break for Life tour, and I believe you were honored by President Reagan for that. For you and Alex English were honored by Ronald Reagan for that. Can you give me a little bit and everybody else a little bit insight on the Fast Break for Life tour, and then I'd love to talk to you about Dikembe after that.
Sure. Well, first of all, this was Alex's idea, Alex English's idea. So it wasn't my idea to begin with. He went to give a speech. He was invited to speak on a reservation, and he came back and he said to me, "Do you know that the teenage suicide rate is higher on Indian reservations than it is in the inner city?" I said, "No, I didn't know that." And he goes, "And did you know that substance abuse is worse on the reservations than it is in our general society?" And he says, because the isolationism of the reservations. And he said, we need to do something. So we brainstormed, and Bill Young was our director of PR. And so we put together this program. And I think Bill's the one who named it Fast Break for Life Tour. Excuse me. And we would take players and coaches on a volunteer basis to a different reservation every September, all over the country. And we would spend 2 days, and we'd go in the night before and work with the tribal council and get educated about their particular problems with their young people. And basketball is kind of a commonality in that culture. It's a very popular sport. And so we use basketball as the vehicle to talk to these kids about healthy lifestyle, making good decisions, and finding a way to live your dream, whatever it may be. And so Dikembe was always great about going to these things because, again, it's all volunteer. Nobody makes any money doing it, and it's taking away your time. And it's right before we go to training camp. So, just to give you an idea what kind of person Dikembe was, one year we were going to go to Montana to the Little Bighorn, and I was telling Dikembe about it, and he goes, "Well, I got to be in the Congo, in Africa, for what he was doing there." And I said, "Well, don't worry about it this year. You know, I mean, you go almost every year. You don't need to worry about it." He goes, "No, I'm going to be there." And so he flew from the Congo, met me in Salt Lake City. We caught a flight from Salt Lake City up to Montana, and spent 2 days on a reservation up there with these kids, because he didn't want to miss out on the opportunity to work with the kids. He flew all the way from Africa. He was wearing a suit. So we get to Salt Lake City. He's got a suit on. You know, we get on a plane, we fly to Montana, and then to top it off, we meet with the tribal council, and they said, "We want to take you through a sweat lodge experience if you're interested." So we said, "Yeah, we'd like to have the experience." And so with a sweat lodge, it's like this domed structure. It's built kind of like a teepee, but it's a dome, and it's got layers and layers of blankets on it. And in the middle of it, there's a pit where they put red hot rocks, and so it's like the most intense sauna you could imagine. And when you have to strip down to go into it. So Dikembe's got a suit on. He takes his suit off, hangs it in the bushes outside of all this, and we go in. You got to crawl in because it's probably it may be 4 feet tall or something. I can't remember, but you had to sit in it, and you sit around this pit, and they close the flaps and there's no source of light at all. And so you get a little disoriented because there's literally no light, and the heat is intense. And the chief told us if anybody has to leave, it won't insult anybody, so don't worry about it. We made it through the 45 minutes of the ceremony that they go through. And then they open the flap up, and you follow the chief barefooted down to the Little Bighorn River and submerge yourself into the Little Bighorn River, which is snow runoff water that's ice cold. So they go from extreme heat to cold. And, so we get back up and they have towels for us and dry off, and Dikembe's putting his suit back on out in the wilderness, and probably the one of the craziest things that happened with him, excuse me, we were in Steve Smith, Alan Henderson, Dikembe, and me. We were in North Dakota at a reservation, and at dinner of the tribal council, Dikembe said, "Could we ride horses while we're here?" And the chiefs that we're meeting with said, "Absolutely. We'll do it early in the morning. We'll pick you guys up. We'll take you, and we'll have horses for you. You can ride before we go meet with the kids and spend the day with them." So we get into this corral. Steve and Alan had never been on horses in their lives. And so everybody, there's a handler holding the horse. So Steve and Alan very gingerly and cautiously are getting up on these horses and are not comfortable at all. And the handlers are holding the reins. They're saying, "Don't worry, the horse isn't going anywhere. Nothing's going to happen. Just sit there." Dikembe's laughing at him. He's got a cowboy hat on, and he's going, "What's wrong with you guys?" It's like, I know how to ride. I rode last year in Mexico. And so he gets on a horse. His feet are almost touching the ground because they don't have a horse big enough for him. And so he's telling Steve and Alan, he's going like, all you do if you want to go, you just kick the horse and it takes off. And if you want to stop, you just pull back on the reins and you go, whoa, and it stops. There's nothing to it. So he kicks the horse. Well, the horse takes off running. Now, luckily, we're in a corral, so he can't go out, he's not loose. So he's running around the corral, and Dikembe drops the reins and is going, "Stop, stop." And, instead of saying, after he told us, supposed to pull back and say, "Whoa." Well, horse isn't stopping. He slides off the back of the horse and falls against the fence. And so I'm watching this, and I'm on a horse too. And I'm watching this, and I'm thinking, "Oh my God, we're going to lose our all-star center, to fall off of a horse on a reservation." And to make matters worse, Ahmad Rashad's film crew was there from Inside Stuff, his old show he used to have. Mm-hmm. They were filming the whole thing, the whole visit. And so after we finished all, and Stephen Allen, as soon as Dikembe slides off the back, so he didn't get bucked off or anything. He just slides off the back of the horse. Steve and Alan couldn't get off their horses fast enough. I mean, they were yelling like, "Get me off this thing! Get me off this thing!" They were scared to death that something was going to happen. So I had to ask the film crew. I said, do you mind getting rid of that footage? Because we don't need to show that on TV. That's him falling off a horse. Unfortunately, they were nice enough not to show it. So, but Dikembe was special individual. He was incredible.
Yeah, he's I've always thought of him now. I mean, I don't know him personally like you or Derek. A lot of the NBA brotherhood knows him, but from someone who watched basketball for a very long time, we followed a lot of players' careers. I looked at Dikembe as the fun uncle, the guy that you always would just want to be around. You talk to him, he's probably one of the nicest guys you could ever meet. Always probably wanting to put you ahead of him, help you out whenever possible. Just one of the true, really true good guys the league has ever known, on the court and off the court. I mean, love hearing the stories that you have from your experiences with Dikembe. But yeah, just for me on a personal standpoint, it was kind of a tough loss knowing that he passed away, because from a fan's perspective, it was like, wow. I mean, this is a guy you couldn't root against. It was hard for me to root against him at all. He was just a nice guy.
He was a great competitor, but he was friends to everybody he met. I mean, he embraced people, and they in turn embraced him back, and he would do anything to help. Everybody knows, I think, about the hospital he built in the Congo in his mother's name. His mother got sick when there was a war going on in the Congo, and it wasn't safe to take her to the hospital. It was too far away, and so she passed away. And she didn't need to. Had she been able to get to the hospital successfully, she would have survived. Excuse me. So he raised the funds to build a hospital in where he grew up in his village, and he showed me all the pictures of the previous medical facilities. I mean, it was the most primitive thing you could possibly see. And they built this first-class hospital. And then he was responsible for getting the Basketball Without Borders to go to Africa. And I went with him to Johannesburg 1 year, to South Africa for that event, spent a week there. And, he pushed the NBA to do the league over there, and, just open up that continent to exposure to the NBA, and the fact that there are a lot of talented players coming off the continent of Africa. So is just a remarkable individual. And I don't know anybody who didn't like him. You could not help but like the guy. He's amazing. He was, I don't know, Adam Silva wrote something about how he was larger than life. I mean, he truly was, not just in his size, but just in his heart and his integrity and his caring for people. It was just extraordinary.
Yeah, you're also describing yourself, sir.
Oh, Derek, that's very nice of you. Thank you.
I mean, hey, Rudy, I just wanted to thank Mr. Babcock for coming on. It was very important to me. I cried when I heard about Mutombo, Dikembe dying at 58 years old. Today that's young.
Yeah,
and to lose, and it's sad because we lost not only, like I said, a great player, but just a guy. It's a guy that was not. No matter what we say, it's really not saying enough. We have a lot of people. We talk about walking the walk, and people talk the talk, but they don't always walk the walk. Dikembe exemplified everything the NBA is about, what humanitarian is about, and just for you to get to know him like that, I had to talk to you. So I want to thank you very much for your time and being as sincere as you've been throughout the show.
Yeah, if I show you a picture, can you see this? Do you think if I show you a picture?
Yeah, I should be able to.
I believe we can.
Let's see if you can.
Oh yeah,
you can see that. Oh, I recognize a few people there.
Can you tell me
who my brother. Chocolate Thunder. I see a whole lot of greats in that picture.
Who can you name there?
I can name Alex English. I can name Daryl Dawkins. I can name on my left. So let me see here. I got Alex. I got Big Daryl. I'm trying to see, is that Kenny? I can't see on the left. Is that?
Okay, that's Sugar Ray. Sugar Ray
Richardson. Okay, and Mr. Babcock. And Mr. Babcock, it's funny you show this picture because a lot of people were wondering what Michael Ray was doing, and I actually made contact with him, and I know he told me he spends time now. I guess his son was playing soccer overseas.
Is that right?
So that picture you showing there is priceless.
That's got to be Dave Cowens and Rick
song, Dave Cowens,
Rick
Wes Matthews.
That's it. You got him. You got him. That's impressive.
Yeah, I got two in there, Derek. I got two besides George. I thought that was George. I don't know if George was any good.
I played with Wes, so that gives me an advantage. I actually, my first team that I actually went to play professionally overseas, I went with Wes Matthews and Ron Brewer, Mr. Babcock. So that was interesting start to my European career. Yes, sir.
Oh wow! Here's that's the last time I was with Dikembe.
Yeah, man. That's love.
Yeah. How long ago was that picture, Mr. Brown?
That was probably 3 or 4 years ago. I ran into him at a Hawks game.
Yeah.
And that was the last time I got to talk to him in person. We communicated a lot, but in person, it's the last time I saw him. Special guy.
Very special
His
guy.
memory will live on forever. And the NBA, we lost a good one, a great one actually, and the world lost a great human being. And Mr. Babcock, I love you, sir. I want to
Thanks,
thank
Derek.
you again. We've talked before, but this
Yeah.
was even more special because we just lost a great one. And so I want to thank you, and I'll just never forget. I hold you in the same regard.
Well,
I
it's
wish
very
the
nice of
young
you.
people do they well. You're top of the line. I told you that before, and I hope the young people start studying their history a little more.
But
Guys like an Anthony Edwards, so they
yeah.
can know about people like Mr. Pete Babcock.
Well, I'll tell you what. Let's have me on again, and we'll go through some stuff on history of the game, because I can tell you some great stories about how Red Auerbach was when he drafted Chuck Cooper as the first African American
Yeah,
in the NBA.
I talk to his son all the time.
Okay.
Still, yeah.
All right. Well, Chuck and I do. I keep in touch with Chuck too. But have you heard the story about Red Auerbach and how Red knew it was okay to draft him?
No.
I haven't
Okay,
heard
well,
that.
Red was good friends with Bobby Douglas. Bobby Douglas was the head coach of the New York Renaissance, which was one of the most successful teams in the 1930s and 40s in the country. It was an all-black team, and he was the owner and he was the coach. So it was black-owned, black-coached, and an all-black team. And the first world championship that was an integrated world championship was in 1939 in Chicago, and they beat the Oshkosh, whatever their name was, the Oshkosh team, which was an all-white team. They beat them for the world championship. But the Harlem Globetrotters were in that same tournament, and Abe Saperstein had a deal with the NBA, and the deal was when the league was going to integrate, right before they're going to integrate, he said, "We'll play double headers in your arenas, but don't touch my players." And so NBA owners were afraid to take any of his players because they needed the Globetrotters to sell tickets. And the Globetrotters were a huge draw. Well, there were two players, Chuck Cooper and Sweetwater Clifton, who were kind of, Abe Saperstein thought they were clubhouse lawyers because they were the two best educated players on the team. They understood the math of the situation. They figured out how much money Abe was making by ticket sales, by counting the people on the stands, how much they were getting paid, how much Abe was keeping. And so they were campaigning with Abe for higher pay and better living conditions on the road, because they had terrible living conditions on the road. And so Abe wanted to get rid of those two. So Bobby Douglas found out about it, and he was good friends with Red. So he calls Red and he says, "Hey, you can draft Chuck Cooper and Sweetwater if you want, because Abe wants to get rid of him." And that's how Chuck ended up going to the Celtics, was because of that contact. The reason that Bobby Douglas and Red were good friends is when Red was a high school player in New York City, at 16 years of age, he had heard about the New York Renaissance and how they were great. They were well coached, they were disciplined, and they were talented. So he takes the train by himself to Harlem, buys a ticket, goes in the arena, is one of the only white people in the arena as a 16-year-old kid. He watches them play. After the game is over, he wants to meet Bobby Douglas because he really respects what he's done. So he manages somehow to get in the locker room. He introduces himself, but then he says, "I got a question for you, coach." And he goes, so Bobby Douglas is like, "What is it?" And he goes, "Well, the first half you were blowing that team out and you were playing man-to-man defense. The second half you went to a zone and you let them get back in the game, and you ended up winning by 10 or 12, but you were blowing them out. Why would you change?" And so the players were kind of upset, like, "Why you question our coach?" And Bobby Douglas said, no, I want to answer the question for him. And he said, "Listen, young man," he said, "this is how this business works." He said, "Two things." He said, "I have to pay all the players you see here in the locker room. I have contracts with all of them. I own the team. We have to sell the games out in order to pay the players. The fans want to see a good game. We could have beat that team by 30. If we did that, fans are going to go, next time we play that team, fans will go, well, I'm not going to go watch that game. It won't even be close. Plus, I want to schedule that team again. If they think there's a chance they might beat us, they're going to come back and play us. If we beat them by 40 points, they're going to come back and play us again. And I need them to come back and play us. And so they developed a friendship. 16-year-old kid and this adult male, white, black, they become really close friends and develop this relationship. And Bobby Douglas is the one that helped Red get into the NBA coaching, which is a whole other story. But anyway, have me back sometime. We'll go through the history of some of this stuff, the behind-the-scenes stories that are pretty fascinating, and players should know about them.
Yeah, we pride ourselves here, Mr. Babcock, is we try to educate as many people on the past of NBA and even basketball in general. I'm a very old, 45 years old, but I'm kind of like with Derek. Him and I talk all the time on the phone, and we talk older players, and it's like we just have a great time. So I'd be honored and humbled to have you back on so we can talk some NBA history and hopefully bring all the players that the game was built on, basically, because they're the foundation for everything.
Yeah. Anytime you guys want to do it, just you call. I'll be happy to do it.
Well,
Awesome.
I think I told you before, sir, when you tell me that, I'm going to want you back because I wanted to go more. The next time we have you come back, I want to get into the pre-draft camp, how you were over that for 20 years, and several other stories. So thank you very much for your time tonight.
Anytime, guys.
Yes, sir.
I enjoy it. I enjoy talking to you guys.
Have a great night.
Awesome.
Okay.
Mr. Pete Babcock, thank you for joining us here on Sweep the League. For everybody else out there, we will be on tomorrow at 9 p.m. We will have Mr. Babcock on again talking about more stuff because we barely scratched the surface with him tonight. So for Derek Gervin, for Mr. Pete Babcock, this is Rudy Campos Jr. Appreciate everybody joining us tonight. We will see you guys tomorrow, knuckleheads.
Everybody have a great night. Stay safe.
Are you a hockey fan looking for the latest on the Edmonton Oilers, Pittsburgh Penguins, and NHL news of the week? Barry and Carson Best bring it all to you on the Best Boys Center Ice podcast. They break down games, provide insider updates, and keep you up to speed every week. Don't miss out. Subscribe now and join their hockey family.
Welcome to the Lean Left, Lean Right podcast, where spirited debates and open discussions reign supreme. Join hosts Rudy and Shemaya as they dive headfirst into the hottest topics in politics and beyond. They're all about seeking common ground without losing their passion for their perspectives. If you're ready for real talk and honest opinions, subscribe now and join the conversation.
We build a legacy, they know the name. STL music, it's a movement, not just a claim. Loyalty, respect, that's the code we honor. In the face of adversity, we stand and stronger. We build a legacy, they know the name. STL music, it's a movement, not just a claim. Loyalty, respect, that's the code we honor. In the face of adversity, we stand and stronger.